The strange Red Bull F1 leap that has confused Ferrari. Red Bull has dominated yet again in 2022, scoring another 1-2 finish in the season and absolutely destroying their competition ahead. What was even more impressive is the fact that Verstappen was able to be 17 seconds quicker than Perez on Sunday and 26 seconds ahead of the third-place Sainz, something that was done during the Mercedes dominating in the turbo hybrid era. Although the championship fight was close at some points during the season, now it's evident that Red Bull found a pace that Ferrari aren't able to focus. And what's even more worrying for them, the sectors in which they were faster throughout the season have been dominated by Red Bull in Spa. So what is it that Red Bull found during this weekend that has Ferrari worried and confused? Stick around with us to find out more. Verstappen has dominated throughout all his outings during the Spa weekend, setting times that were just uncatchable for any competitor out there. He was so dominant that he didn't even need to do 2 laps during Q1, Q2 and Q3, which made Ferrari scratch their heads in their garage. Throughout the season, Ferrari's trademark were the medium and low-speed corners, and the second sector in Spa showed that Ferrari has lost this advantage, and Verstappen was 0.3 of a second faster than Leclerc. This was noted by the Monegasque, who said, "Red Bull were on another level. They found something this weekend that is a bit worrying for us, because for now we don't exactly understand. They are still extremely quick in the straights. It looks like they have no downforce, but then they get into the corners and they're as quick as us or quicker." What's even more impressive is that Verstappen didn't even need the full support of the DRS system to pass during the race. The Dutchman started from P14 and was able to climb to P8 after the first lap, so from there on, it was a walk in the park for him. He managed to take the lead in lap 12, and with open DRS, the deficit in the speed was as much as 20 to 30 kilometers per hour, if you compare any other driver to Verstappen. Yes, Red Bull are dominant force this season, and they've shown that throughout all races so far, but we haven't seen dominance as big as this one. Ferrari was able to at least be close and challenge them, or even beat them when Red Bull was ahead, such is the case in Austria. But in Spa, nobody was to be found challenging even Perez for P2, let alone Verstappen for the lead. So what is it in the RB18 that made them, as Verstappen said, feel like their car is on rails? Mattia Binotto also admitted that the pace that the Red Bull cars have shown is something that is concerning them, but he expects the gap to be not as big as it was in Spa, adding, "The gap we have seen is not the gap we'll have in the next races. Whenever you have a slight advantage on aerodynamic efficiency, it's normally amplified and very obviously seen on such a circuit as Spa. We hope to be back in the next races to be closer." Just another factor that shows how good Verstappen was during the race is that the fastest lap of the race that was set by him was set on medium tyres. Leclerc pitted in the penultimate lap for soft tyres, and although all factors pointed out to him to take the fastest lap out of Verstappen's hands, he failed to do so by 0.6 seconds. He had DRS, an empty fuel tank, and a much fresher, faster compound of tyres mounted, and still failed by 0.6 of a second to take the additional point out of Verstappen. According to Leclerc, it was really strange to see Red Bull performing so fast, and yet in a so dominant manner, as they haven't experienced as big a deficit as this one throughout the season. Before thinking about progress, we need to understand where Red Bull's pace is coming from. And for now, it's a big question mark, because if you look at the midfield also, the gap is more or less the same as it's been for the first part of the season. It's just Red Bull is so much quicker than everybody. So it's strange. One huge factor that was noticeable right away is how the RB18 was designed for Spa. Therefore, we could conclude that the performance of the cars was track-specific. This means that although we expect Red Bull to dominate in further tracks, the difference won't be as big as it was in Spa, and the competition should be brought closer. Even Verstappen himself said that he doesn't expect Red Bull to have such an advantage in the upcoming tracks, adding, "I think our car is very efficient, and then this track suits it perfectly. I know that some tracks which are coming up might be a little more difficult, and I expect again a good battle with Ferrari. It was just this track seemed to be perfect for the car." We shouldn't forget that there is a technical directive that took place in Spa regarding the floor flexibility. Although Mercedes has accused Ferrari and Red Bull of illegally flexing their floors up to 6mm when the threshold is 2mm, it seems like Red Bull's car wasn't that flexible. When the accusation was made, Verstappen laughed and said that Mercedes is the team that has the most flexible floors out of all the cars in the grid, and now it seems like that is the truth. Maybe Red Bull wasn't as quick as much. Maybe it's just the other cars were slower due to the setups they were forced to implement on their cars regarding the technical directives. It has been rumoured that the FIA has forced around 8 or 9 teams to change the floor designs to avoid excessive plank flexing, which was the main pinpoint when it comes to the technical regulations implemented from Spa. Remember that Red Bull was the only team that hasn't suffered from porpoising in the first place, so it's unlikely that they were one of these teams that was alerted by the FIA when it comes to excessive plank flexing. On the other hand, Ferrari and Mercedes were both struggling with this phenomenon, which could point to the fact that they were forced to change their ride heights in order to pass the second part of the technical directive, measurement of the vertical oscillations or porpoising. If this is the case, then Red Bull has benefited from something they pushed against to be implemented, unlike Mercedes, who were assured that it will bring them closer to the top 2 teams when it comes to performance. What's even more impressive is the fact that Red Bull is known to run high-rake cars, and having such an amount of downforce without experiencing porpoising or bottoming out at any circuit just goes to show what an impressive mind Adrian Newey has. The high-rake car of Red Bull could be this dominant at Spa only, but it could be that the team will continue with their ruthless dominance in the rest of the races on the calendar. Red Bull has brought upgrades to every race so far, and it's something that has concerned Mattia Binotto when it comes to the monitoring of the budget cap. According to him, this needs to be looked at more rigorously, and it needs to be monitored more carefully since there are rumours that Red Bull have implemented the new lighter chassis on both their cars in free practice sessions. Christian Horner and Verstappen have denied these accusations and said that they'll implement the chassis in Singapore, and according to reports, 2 out of the 4 million euros that were given to the teams as a result of the rise of the inflation over 3% were spent for this part to be developed. Still, Binotto had a pessimistic approach if this would be the case with his team, saying, "As Ferrari, we would never be capable of introducing a lightweight chassis or a different chassis through the season simply because of the budget cap. I would be very surprised if there's a team capable of doing that." Back to the regulation itself. Is it fair enough? Is it equitable enough? Is the policing sufficient? They are the big question marks. Ferrari should be worried about another thing too, and that is tyre degradation. In Austria, we've seen Red Bull struggling to keep their tyres at an optimum degrading rate, which wasn't the case with Ferrari. However, the team has struggled in Hungary and now in Spa with the same problem. That was highlighted by Binotto too, who said, "We had a lot of tyre degradation we need to look into. They've got a slightly faster car, but tyre degradation has been the element most affecting the performance. We need to understand and try to address it as soon as possible, because it's really important as well for the next races." This problem was also pointed out by Sainz, who was plus 0.6 seconds off the pole-setting lap of Verstappen, and who wasn't able to compete with both of the Red Bulls, having to satisfy with P3 at the end. What do you think about Red Bull's sudden pace in Spa? Let us know in the comments below.